Bill Kero is a political economist and is a friend with the numbers, and he's in the hot seat this morning. Bill, karibu sana.
Asante sana.
How are you doing?
Generally fine.
Generally. And if we go specific? The devil is in the details, as they say, and that'll come into play, that's for sure. Welcome.
Thank you.
To the hot seat. We are in a different country, and... well, actually, I'm saying we're in a different country. That could have so many meanings. But literally, geographically, for the proverb perspective, we're in a different country this week. Dennis is going to share that with you, and then we want you to interpret the proverb for us.
There you go.
Today, below, we are in Eswatini, formerly known as Swaziland. It's an interesting country. It is a country that is surrounded by South Africa, and one of the greatest things that stands out about Eswatini is the fact that it is one of the countries in Africa that has absolute monarchy, still has a king and the leadership and everything. And every December and January, there is a spiritual moment where the king goes in to just cement his authority as the spiritual leader of the kingdom. And an interesting country to visit. Perhaps they have an interesting culture. Yes.
That selection.
Selection that takes place. Now, the proverb today: a man shows his character by what he laughs at. A man shows his character by what he laughs at. What do you make of that?
Wow. It's interesting. Well, if you are... I don't know whether it's similar to the English proverb. Show me your friends and I'll tell you who you are. Sounds a bit close to that, but what I get from that is that there are people who take certain situations. The way you take situations depends on the way you react to it. Your reaction tells you what you think, or what you think of some situations. When there's a serious matter and someone is, I think your reaction kind of tells people who you are really in terms of your understanding, your character or your knowledge. I think this is probably what it means. I don't know.
Yeah. Pretty much your silence that does not really bring out who you are. The moment you open up, especially to comment on something, then we can form a basis to say you belong this side. Well put.
Indeed. We're in a finance season. Proper. Some of us sometimes forget that the budget process starts at the end of August, and then brings us
9 months process.
9-month process, right? Brings us to right about this time where then the elements of the finance bill are then brought out, and then we go into a series of public participation, which we are currently in.
Keeping us busy these days. Every Kenyan, literally.
Yeah. And that is a practice. It's been happening.
Yeah.
But in 2024, probably historically, is the first time that it was then put out on a large national scale, and by virtue of that, on an international scale, a global scale as well. And then we saw after that there was this renaissance, essentially, where everybody wanted to know, to a clear understanding, what happens with the country's resources, how they will be spent, where they will be gotten from, how much tax you will be subjected to, what projects the government is involved in. Everybody wants to know, whether it is the person who is sweeping or the person who's sitting in their luxury vehicle, across board, cutting across social strata. Everybody wants to know what is going on. Brings us 2025, whereby it would appear as though folks have been a little bit more careful in terms of what goes into the finance bill, or have they? And I guess that's the question we start. Yes. Or have they been smarter?
Yeah.
Or have they hidden things in plain sight? And so that's what we want to open up today. Of course, we're coming off the place where people have tried to explain what the finance bill actually is presenting for Kenyans this time round, and we've ended up in court behind bars. But we're going to do it a little bit more today and have we gotten to a place whereby now the finance bill is protecting or injuring Kenyans? Below?
These days, everyone I see, including even people working in my business, the first thing they ask is, what is in the finance bill this time? Everyone is so keen about it. After last year, it has really broadened the understanding of what all these things are about, and people want to know what's going on.
Yeah.
But there are two aspects. If you look at finance bill, there are two issues I think that I want to bring out. One, the government's perspective. For the government, it's always about the revenue. That's what the finance bill is about. How do you raise revenue? Additional revenue for running the government, to meet the additional expenditure. That's as far as the government is concerned. Nothing else. The rest is all, a story on, policies, on how to do this and how to generate that. But for the businesses, for instance, and the public, it's not about the revenue. It's about what is the impact of finance bill on your cost of living. What is the impact on your life? And that's the aspect that we are looking at when we are looking. So the two are that's why the two are always at odds. The government wanted to raise revenue, and Kenyans are looking at what is the impact on my life. And that is the part that the government doesn't want to bring out always, the impact of the finance bill. So if you look at finance bill generally, any time, including this one, to answer your question, simply put, it would injure, of course, because it would affect your life adversely, because it would affect your cost of living. That there's no doubt about it. Even this one, which many people would look at it and say, no, this is not as bad as last year.
Yeah.
There are no new taxes. And, you look at those are the terms the government used when the CS was discussing this a couple of months ago. Said no new taxes on this one. You will not find them. But at the end of the day, when you play smart, that's the way. Let me put it that way. Then the devil is in the details. You'll find that some of the measures that they have taken would obviously have a significant impact on the lives of Kenyans, on the cost of living. But the simple reason that you want to raise additional revenue, however small it is, means you have to get some more taxes.
Right.
From that finance bill. That's basically what it means. That simply put, and there's no doubt that the fact that it is there means you have to raise some revenue, and they're going to raise some revenue, and it's going to have an impact here.
Okay, is it possible to do this? The word progressive is put behind other jurisdictions, whereby progressive means that your economy is moving forward, it's thriving, and at the same time you're able to take care of the livelihoods of people, whereby they don't feel the pinch as much, on one hand. And then number two, there's actual visible, tangible manifestation of what these taxes are actually doing. So is it possible then to have a tax regime in place that does the things that they are needed, whereby the people are taken care of?
Look at it this way. There's no time in the history of this country Kenyans have said we don't want to pay taxes. Kenyans have been paying taxes. In fact, we pay, and I've always repeated this, we pay the highest amount of tax in the whole of East and Central Africa, more than all of these African countries combined. I mean, there's no doubt that we have no objection to paying, and Kenyans are paying taxes. The question is this tax working for you? And is it being done in a manner that really helps the economy also grow and also have money? You have some money in your pocket and meet your cost of living and so forth. No, those are the challenges. That the way the government has looked for taxes in this country has let me use the word, has become punitive. Really, I mean you're looking at, we must raise revenue. You're not looking at other aspects of the action. For example, that people need to have some money. They need to have some disposable income. They need to, you've got school fees to pay. You have got so many other things you need to do. So it's not all about giving money to government and government working for you. I need to do some things myself. So I think there's something about, if you look at our constitution, that talks to the burden of tax. That cautions is one of the principles in public finance, that it should not be a burden on society. Governments, yes, have the powers through the parliament to tax, But they don't have absolute power to tax the way they want. It's up to the people through their representatives to determine how much money you want to give to government to do whatever we want. The rest we want to keep. I mean, we want to do our own things.
Sure.
Yeah.
That's the concept. But where Parliament then loses that, and executive also loses that, then it appears that we are the ones who know what is good for you.
Yeah.
Bring the money.
So
I think that is where the trouble we are in now, where the government thinks they have a monopoly of ideas. They determine your life, and they're the ones who decide what to do, and they tell give us all the taxes, collect more taxes. So every year you're increasing 300, 400, 500 billion, in your expenditures.
yeah, Carol, you mentioned something that is very critical in the sense that whenever we look at a finance bill, there is always the aspect of raising more taxes and the impact that would have on the people, and that the government would never want to share this information on the impact that additional revenue, additional taxes would have on a common mwananchi. Is it about time that the government finally started having honest and open conversations with Kenyans so that we all can agree? Because like you've said, Kenyans have never said we do not want to pay taxes. We want to have honest conversations so that we all agree on how we move forward. Is it about time?
No, but you remember when this administration came in, there was a lot of talk about why don't we have a conversation on these things? Why don't we have a national, gathering of Kenyans to discuss the economy, so that we actually decide what is that we want, because you want to grow some aspects of the economy, but when you put taxes, it's really pushing down that aspect of that sector of the economy. And there's many examples of the economy. Where does tax come from? It's from businesses. People have to make an earning. If you have level of earning, if your income is going to be affected, you can't do business. You shut down. Today I was reading in one of the media that NSF complaining that in the last 2-3 years, up to nearly 500 employers who are paying contributions, for the employees shut down. I mean, it's. But when you look at the statistics, they'll tell you millions of companies have shut down in the last 5-6 years. So the thing is, there's need to have that. But I don't think the government, this one and any other, would be willing to discuss that, because they know that the bottom line means they would be stopped from doing certain things. But that conversation is available every day through our representatives in Parliament. Every day is available to them. But that's the challenge we have, that Parliament is not really putting its foot down and saying, no, this is not good for our people. You saw it in the finance bill, where things were, the measures that were specifically hurting a particular MP and his farmers and his own electorates, and they went ahead and still voted for it. And later saying, oh, sorry, we had to.
Where do you see this going, Carol? Because there's one part is, this is what we are proposing in the budget. The other conversation is, this is the impact of that proposal. What then you're saying is, on this other side, they don't want us to talk about the impact. And you look at the case of Rose Njeri. She was using her skills to try to educate the public through civic education, using a platform that is free for everyone, that, hey, look, this is what is contained in this. And very quickly, 3, rejection of Section A, Part 1 of the first schedule, which talks about zero-rated status for essential goods. And she is actually then saying this is going to increase the cost of living, especially for low-income households. And you go on and so forth. So where do you see this going? Because all of a sudden, there's this interest into the finance bill like we've never had before.
There's no two ways about it. Kenyans have to continuously speak about this matter. There's no other way about it. You must continuously talk about it and agitate for change on some of these things. Because the government would obviously want you to keep quiet, and they introduce the taxes, and people pay taxes and suffer. They don't really think about anything else. But there's also what used to happen in the good old days. Yeah, let me use the word, the good old days. Government used to engage with various sectors of the economy. It used to be, budgeting used to be a serious business. To do a finance bill was a very complicated thing for a finance minister in the old days, before up to around 2013. Before 2013, let me put it that way. It was not an easy thing, because you had to balance between the interest of the businesses, the farmers, the public, and all those things. They had to really weave their way through to find out how to get some little income to try and balance their budget. But nowadays, it's become, it's shocking. You just sit in the office and say, 5% on this, 15% on this, 16%.
Let's get what we can.
Let's get what we can. And completely disregard all the submissions. And you saw it in 24. Hundreds of institutions submitted. Thousands and thousands of submissions were made. And they just pushed aside and they went ahead with whatever they had. And that's the sad thing. But that's the way things are supposed to be. That engagement is critical in any country. That's what they do. I mean, you must talk to a sector and tell them, look, you are in fertilizer, we are in famine. We want to remove fertilizer from zero rating to exempt from your sector. What do you think would be the impact? You talk to the people who are in that industry, in the farming sector and so forth.
They are actually the ones
who would then tell the government, look, if you do that, there would be no impact. We are not going to pass that cost and there will be no impact. Then the government say, okay, then perhaps we can introduce this. Or they'll tell you, no, the moment you remove that, and we can't claim that VAT, there's going to be a 16% increase in the cost of fertilizer. And then they say, okay, maybe we'll need to look for something else. But if you don't engage, and you just sit down and, in Treasury and come up with something, and then you go around to the public and say, what do you think? And whatever we think is, again, not...
really doesn't matter. So, Bilo, we're saying that essentially public participation can actually be beneficial to government. It is not necessarily just to hear the views of the people and then put it in a box and put it onto the table.
Oh, yes.
But you can actually use this for this progressive economy that we are talking about.
Exactly.
The practitioners in the industry can tell you, look, if you taxed here and not
impact.
here, this will be the impact.
Exactly.
So it can actually happen
and
in that manner.
If you look at the submissions, for example, by the sector, the Kenya Association of Manufacturers, they actually tell them exactly what the impact of every measure that has been proposed in the finance bill is going to be, and then when they disregard it, a year later, 2 years later, and they see the impact, then they start backtracking. You remember that thing, for example? Let me give you a good example. The 17% import, tax that they introduced on importing and construction materials like cement and so forth, and clinker and those things, and they said we want to encourage local whatever. And they were told, look, we don't have capacity. There was a meeting that was held a couple of years earlier that was agreed that a timeline by which we will be self-sufficient in our own clinker production and so forth and so forth. And the government ignored all that and they said, no, we're going to introduce 16. If you import any of those, penalty, 17% on that. 2 years later, they were told the impact on the cost of your construction, on the building sector, on business in general, in that whole sector, they saw it. They started backtracking. Now I think they're proposing it should be reduced to 5%. So sometimes they're given all this information, and it's not that people don't want to pay. I keep repeating this, but the government is being told this is the impact of your action on the economy, and the same economy that you want to generate income taxes from. Because if you affect my business, how will I generate more taxes? I'll give you, for example, the sector I'm in. Vegetable in the cooking oil sector. The amount of taxes we pay if you import 1 ton of crude palm oil or crude vegetable oil is up to 31% of the cost. 31% on at the port of Mombasa. That's what
to bring it in,
including taxes and levies. Yes, taxes, duty 10% plus all those other things, railways and whatever, levy and everything, VAT. And so when you find that product sold now, all that cost
is transferred.
Plus another 16% on it, that VAT that you're going to charge again. So you get into a situation where nearly 40-50% of your cost on a product that is basic, essential, it's because of the taxes. And this, I keep saying, countries like, go to Ethiopia, go to Egypt. Some of these countries, they don't, on basic essential commodities, they simply do not even tax it because they want the cost of living to be low. Even if you don't have a job, you should be able to have some bread on the table or something on the table to eat. That's the way they look at it.
There's an argument that I've had. This is the argument now from this other side. You look at our economy. 80% of Kenya's economy is from the informal sector. So when you're doing tax proposals, the idea then is effectively you'll broaden the tax base, which essentially is going to stifle these small businesses or sectors. How then do you balance? Because this is 80%. So the bulk of what you're going to get is coming from these 80%. So in order for you to generate, you have to stifle. So there is that question of you have to. How do they balance this?
No, it's not. Look, we we know that 80% of the people in this country survive on subsistence, what we call informal economy. But basically what you're saying is the subsistence farmer or people are surviving on their own, self-employed on the farms, and very so low an income that you cannot even think of introducing some of the taxes that ideally would be compared to other developed countries like America, where that kind of SMEs or that kind of informal sector is very small. It's less than 10%. But at the same time, if you look at the level of taxes that are collected in UK and in US, the percentage of the population who pays taxes, compare also with Kenya, the difference is not very huge. I was just looking at, for example, in UK, it's about 50, less than 50% of the population. And then you look at Kenya, they want to push it to 30-something percent. And, it's over 30-something percent. And this is a country where over 80% of the people are not people who can generate enough income to pay this form of tax or that form of tax. So to answer your question, I think, you see, you do not kill the goose that lays the golden eggs.
Yeah.
The 20% of the outside the informal, the 20% is the one that generates all the income, for example, from which the government generates most of its taxes. These are the employees in the formal sector. These are the people in manufacturing sector, people in big businesses. These are the people who generate most of the taxes. And so when you broaden, if the idea of broadening, when we came up with VAT in just around Kibaki's time, in the beginning of just before Kibaki's time, but one of the policies Kibaki came up with was that, look, direct taxes, which are income tax on your salary, on your earnings, profit, and so forth, are very difficult to collect. And one, it also has significant impact on your cost of living and so forth. So he came up with, and it's a bit of a imbalance. It creates a bit of unfairness because only those who are earning will pay.
Yes.
So they came up with a policy that let us expand on indirect taxes, the taxes which everybody can pay. This is VAT.
Yes.
Value taxes. So they introduced VAT on virtually everything.
Right.
So even if I am not somebody who is working, if I go and buy a bottle of water, I'm paying 16% tax. If I buy my pencil for the school, even your kid at home, he's got VAT, he's paying tax.
Yeah.
So that way, there's some sort of fairness, and everyone is paying taxes. So, but the issue is that's why I keep saying the issue then is not about the paying. Paying, everyone is paying tax. The issue is how much do you want? How much should you collect? How much is enough? I mean, so you keep saying every year, increase it by another 500 billion, increase by another 500 billion. Today, our expenditure is 4.2 trillion. I mean, it's crazy. It's $40 billion. Just go and add up all the expenditure budgets for Uganda, Tanzania, Rwanda, and Burundi, all of them combined. It will be less than the 40 billion.
And Carol,
one country.
Yeah, and Carol, there is the aspect of the government wanting to increase taxes. Then there is the aspect of deficit that is there, which then pushes the government to go into borrowing. And you look at, if I look at just the summary of the bill, the fiscal deficit in the financial year 2025-2026 will be financed by net external financing of 284.2 billion shillings, and in the domestic market 591.9 billion shillings. Just what does that do to the manufacturing sector, to those who want to go get loans for them to be able to push their business? How does that affect the economy in terms of growing if the government itself is going into the domestic market to borrow?
What is debt? In public sector, debt simply means accumulation of the deficits, budget deficits. So when you do a budget like this one, your proposed expenditure is 4.2 trillion, and your estimated revenue, you're saying, is going to be 3.3 or something.
Yes,
close to that, 3.3 trillion. So you're saying I have a deficit of approximately 900
billion.
That deficit is what we call debt, because you have to borrow it. That's what it is. So that has accumulated all this 11 trillion, 12 trillion that we are stuck with today. And so ultimately what happens is that then the little revenue that you collect, the 3.3 trillion, about half of it then goes into paying those debts, which are due, because you've collected this over years. And so you got into a vicious cycle where now you have no choice but borrow more again in order to finance this budget.
I have to ask about this 900 billion below, just before we go to a break here. Is that so? If you say that your budget for you to do everything that you need to do in a fiscal year is 4.2 trillion, right? You say this is what we have available, 3.3. Okay, so you're looking for 900 billion. We also know that according to the law, you can only borrow for development, or you can borrow to meet in the short term a budget deficit. Now, does this fall into borrowing for a budget deficit? This 900 billion?
No, you see now, that's the way the figures are.
Yeah.
But in the numbers which are submitted in the official documents, you will not see the 900 billion.
What will you see?
The figures will be hidden in a number of ways.
Yes.
One, there are existing debts which are rolled over, which mature. This will be rolled over. So some of the 900 will be included in those ones which will be rolled over again. Some you'll be borrowing through domestic, and that will specify. That will borrow 200 from the domestic market or something. Others will come through aid from people who are financing projects.
Yes.
They'll be put like external financing of some road or some project. So you will not see an actual figure saying that I'm going to borrow now 900. But so the law now, when you look at now compliance with the law, they'll tell you, look, as far as the law is concerned, we have only borrowed this amount. They will not. The other figures will not be considered as loans. And that's the way they get around the law. One
thing you said below is that yes, we're looking at the numbers, we're crunching, and we're saying, okay, this is what it means in the fiscal year ending July 2026. This is what to expect. The numbers are very important, but then more important is for us to talk about these things. That if we don't talk about them, that we're doing a disservice, first of all to ourselves, and then to the general public at large, in terms of what this actually means and how it affects you. And so that is actually part of citizen-based governance, to say that, look, we need to know exactly what's happening, because it's very easy to hide things in the mask of ignorance. You can hide it there because you know that people are not going to ask, people are not going to speak, people are just going to take it as it comes and fly with it. So now when we look at some of these things that could be concealed in the details, what are some of those things that we're probably going to have to I don't want to say look forward to in the next 12 months, or have the displeasure of experiencing when it comes to this new tax regime?
You see, look at the most common one that has been discussed by everyone. This moving quite a number of products in the pharmaceutical sector, in fertilizers and many others, from zero rating to being exempt from VAT. Simply put, what you are telling, what you are doing, the reason why you are doing that, because there's a reason why you are doing it. You're not just doing it because the word zero rating and exempt have no meaning. No, they'll tell you very smartly, look, there's no tax on exempt, and there's no tax on zero. There's nothing. There's no difference. That's what the government will tell you. When they want to be smart. But then, okay, if there's no difference, then why are you moving it from this schedule to the other schedule? It's because it has an impact. It has an impact. Because here, I am able to claim that input tax, that VAT on the raw materials that I import in order to make those products. On the other one, on the exempt one, I will not have that opportunity. So what they're saying then is they're avoiding, that because what it means, input means that if I am buying this phone, I am going to be sold this for 100,000 shillings, for example. Then the invoice will read 100,000 plus 16% VAT they'll charge.
Yes.
So if it is zero rated, that is what I'll pay. So that 16 now, if I am selling it again, I will also charge another 16% on it. So I will knock off my 16 on that out when I'm selling, with the other 16% that I paid when I was buying it. But now, when you're moving it to zero, I will not be able to do that offset. That's basically what it means. That I will charge you that 16% for them and pay them. But I will not be able to
You
offset.
can't recharge.
Yes. When it is 0, that 16 which I paid, I will not be able to offset. That's what it means on exempt. So they will get their 16. That's what it means.
But you won't.
But otherwise, they would have got nil because I would have offset between the two. Now they will collect the 16 straight. So it's a way of getting more revenue. And so now for me, I will still charge 16%. So my phone will still have the same price. So in fact, it will be more because, now I was getting 16 minus 16, I was getting 0. So now because I have to pay 16, I will now charge that 16 will be an additional fee that
so the original cost of the phone now you will say is 120,000 shillings, for example.
Exactly. And I'll now charge you 16% more on the VAT when I'm charging you. So the thing will be more expensive to you. So the government is getting their revenue. That's the main thing. But to you'll be paying more.
You learn something
Otherwise, because I would have knocked off the 2, I would have said, okay, I'll sell at 100. Because that 16 I was charged and recovered through the other 16.
So for purposes of clarity below, and I think this is very important because I think today somebody has heard something that we've never really understood today. That when you say 0 rating, what that means is that you pay 16 when it is coming in terms of tax. And then when you sell the item, you can charge 16 on it, right? Now, when it's exempt, you pay 16, but when you say it's exempt from taxes, you cannot now charge 16 again. It cannot come in form of tax. But what usually happens is that people will now add it anyway on the cost of the item and not as a tax element. Am I right?
You see, anytime if you're a businessman, you're buying inputs, you're buying raw materials.
Yeah.
Those things have got taxes on them.
Yes.
If my products are 0 rated, I can claim that input, that extra tax which I paid when I was buying those things. But when it is exempt, I cannot claim.
Yes.
I cannot claim. So that loss of funds that I lost on that payment
is piled on you who are buying.
Yes, I'll put it on to the people who are buying. That's basically what it means. Yeah, so that's the cost that will be passed on. Of course, it's all up to the businessman.
So it's not a benefit to anybody, really. It's a benefit just to government.
The government, yeah.
Yeah, of course. That's what I'm saying. If there was no benefit, they won't move it. The reason why they're moving it is they're avoiding that offset and they're going to get their VAT.
So the conversations around this bill, what areas are of a concern to you, or what areas should Kenyans really be concerned about?
For me, as a businessman, let me tell you. You see, everything that affects the businessman affects the common man, because eventually, what do businessmen do? They're producing products, services, and they're selling to people. So if they are going to be affected by any measure within the finance bill, it's going to affect you and me, everyone. So, for example, I'll give you a simple one, like VAT refunds. It's a major issue for businesses. For example, if you are in export, tea, coffee, flowers, and all these people who are doing exports, there are many Kenyans. When you are exporting anything, goods or services, it's supposed to be exempt from tax. You don't charge VAT. It's that's how you so, and the inputs you have been charged had VAT. So you claim VAT refund on that input based on certain formulas by the government, by treasury, by income tax, by the law. So what happens is now, government has not been refunding. The two people who suffer in business are people who was waiting for VAT refunds, and people who have got pending bills who have supplied the government for one reason or the other. So if you look at this finance bill, for instance, they have extended, when you are submitting your claim for a refund, you're supposed the treasury KRA does an audit. So they have extended the period for that audit, where the audit used to be done in, say, 3 months. Now they've extended it up to 6 months. That means it can take longer for your claims to be verified before it goes for approval for refund. The whole idea is to drag this thing so that the refund process is delayed. Already, as we speak now, for example, this year, it's one of the worst. From March, April, May, we are now in June, no refunds have been paid for VAT.
What are they doing with that money?
It's never happened in the history of this country, where in 3 months in a row, the government has paid 0 VAT refunds, to businesses. And so what does it mean? It means then if I don't have, it affects your cash flow. You're a businessman. You have billions that are outstanding for refunds, or hundreds of millions. So it affects you. So you're going to buy less products, you're going to manufacture less, you're going to produce less, you're going to do less service. So, and these are the same people who they want to collect more taxes from. So it's a kind of shooting yourselves in the foot. You don't want to pay the people who are generating the income. And it's all about meeting deadlines. You have targets. You've got 4.2 trillion, so everyone says no. If you take out something, and nobody wants to, and so I think those are some of the challenges. And apart from all these other ones relating to the moving these products, I think this will affect many industries. So some of those measures, they say administrative, really all of them have impact, one way or the other, on businesses. And ultimately, when business is affected, then it goes down to the people.
Kero, isn't the government shooting itself on the foot in terms of we want to collect more, we are adding more taxes, but in reality, you look at the refunds that you're talking about that you're not being paid, look at the pending bills that do exist, such that if the business is unable to churn more product to sell more, that means the government is collecting less. So isn't the government just making it the work difficult for itself to collect these taxes and move the economy anyway?
There are two things that the government of Kenya has done which has affected our economy. The reason why every Kenyan tells you the economy is bad, things are very tough. One, because government is one of the largest spenders in any economy. In any economy, is a major player.
Yes.
So that has a significant impact on the economy. When if government is buying things,
yes,
all these things, then you as a producer, you as a seller, you as a trader, there's a lot of money that will be in circulation. Second is, for those who supplied goods and services to government and have not been paid, it has a significant impact on the economy. How many people do you know who have supplied government, they have not been paid, they can't afford even lunch, they can't do anything, because they tell you, look, I'm waiting for the last 2 years, I've not been paid. The poor person. So, and this is affecting that person. They have, in fact, some have been forced to shut down their businesses. So those are two major areas. And the reason why the government is doing this is they tell you, our resources are limited, and we need to tax you guys more. If you want us to spend and pay those bills, we need to tax you more. But the issue is, they will never tell you that there's a lot of inefficiency in government.
Right.
Yeah.
There's a lot of wastage. There's a lot of mismanagement and misappropriation. When you look at all that, frankly, if I was the president of this country, I would not be taxing anyone. I'll just take a pen and pencil and go through that estimate, and you'll see how much money you can save through wastage in public service. I mean, it's crazy. It's crazy.
And you say something that
we live large. There's no other. There was a time I went to Sudan, and I was surprised to see before the war, the minister is in a Toyota Corolla. That's the official car of a minister. You walk now in the morning when they're going to work. CS, there'll be plus the chase cars. There'll be 3 Prados, and you saw in the media, in the reports of the auditors, that some CSs have up to 9 cars, and there was a time one had 12 cars. You remember a few years ago.
Yeah.
So we live. So there's so much wastage in public service that they can save a lot of money. Why would you look for 40 billion? They can raise more than 40 billion from the estimates.
From the estimates,
yes.
They can.
Yeah.
You're told the finance bill is looking for 30 billion. You can raise much more than that if you really desire to go through that document.
So the Auditor General exists to essentially look at the spend on budgets. Control of budget says, fine, from the consolidated fund, you can spend 1, 2, 3 based on what we know is supposed to happen. So she gives the go ahead and spend. After that, the Auditor General comes in to give a report as an accountability holder for government, essentially. So is this the place whereby every year the monies that you have said you're going to spend versus the activities that you've actually engaged in find a place? Do we see shilling to shilling for what this budget, essentially, all this hullabaloo that we're creating around the budget, do we see shilling for shilling that it has been spent on the activities that have been budgeted for?
There's no. We have one of our budget. Let me put it. Let me not go into budget transparency. Let me put it this way.
Okay.
If you are in business and you've done business throughout the year and you've closed your financial year, you would then look at your performance, how it was. How much did we make? How much did we lose? What did we spend on? Where did we waste more money? And where can we save? And you look at your performance. In government, it doesn't happen. But the law provides for it. In fact, the law is so powerful that forget about waiting until the end of the year. The office of the controller is real-time audit of government. That's why it's called budget implementation. Every quarter, she submits a budget implementation report. In other words, how did we spend whatever was appropriated
this quarter?
This quarter. And that goes to Parliament. And the whole idea is so that Parliament can have a real-time discussion on the performance. And in addition to that, Parliament also gets expenditure review reports from Treasury, which is required by law to be submitted every quarter. So there is no waiting for the end of the year, so that you can say, okay, in real time, no, you can't spend this and you can't spend that. Forget about even the powers she has of saying, I can't approve this payment or you can't withdraw this money or whatever. But they give Parliament those reports on how the budget is progressing throughout the year. Then comes the audit at the end of the year afterwards and says, okay, this is how the performance was. This was misplaced, this was misappropriated, this was wasted, and this is the way this one was spent well, and they'll submit their report. So what is the whole idea? The whole idea is so that then Parliament can interrogate these reports and take action, remedial action, so that people must comply with those provisions of that law. And in fact, if you look at the Public Finance Management Act, you'll be shocked. There are over 30, 40 different offences for which penalties have been provided for and you'll be surprised. You'll rarely see any public officer or accounting officer who is being penalized for violation of Public Finance Management Act.
Why?
Because the Treasury, which has got the mandate really, doesn't bother. Because when Parliament submits adopts their whatever recommendations, Parliament will look at what the auditor says, and eventually they will do a recommendation and send it to the custodian of national assets, our custodian for public services. Everything is with the Treasury, and Treasury is supposed to then take some action really. But even forget about the Treasury. Even where there is clear theft of money that auditor has flagged, offices like DPP and other offices of government that are supposed to take action, they don't take action. So invariably, anyone in government, when it comes to public finance, if you are involved in any indiscipline or if you are involved in any misappropriation, chances of any action being taken is minimal. And if it happens, then it happens years later when you have left office. And that's why you find then someone gets taken to court, and then the level of conviction becomes very low and so forth. But the issue is not about conviction. The issue is if an officer has misappropriated money or spent money irregularly, which has not been provided for, Parliament should say, okay, sorry, next you're going to be sanctioned. If it's a CS, they can remove him. And they can also say, okay, we're not going to approve that budget for that ministry until that person is removed or whatever. They have powers, wide powers to deal with, but nobody can deal with that because of, obviously, political expediency. That's the challenge in this country. Everything is about politics. We have politicized every office, so you can't take action. And so this person will continue doing the same thing. Money has been provided for by the controller for you to put up this classroom, but they're going to divert it to something else. And the report is there that person has diverted that money, in that quarter to something else, and no action is taken. And the same person will come again next year. So, and last week she talked about, both the auditor and the controller talked about people spending money that have not been budgeted for.
Right.
A very, very common thing now. But, the law is very clear. That person should have been penalized immediately. But nobody takes action. No government office that is responsible takes action. But if you steal a chicken, you'll be dealt with.
Oh, yes.
Oh, yeah.
And you see, you talk about something that has also been captured in this document, yeah? Because if you go on part 21 on expenditure reforms, the document says there is need for rationalization and reduction of non-essential expenditure. The government itself agrees that there is a wastage by its own staff on how they spend public funds. And here is now the question of the judicial system, the justice system not doing anything, those in charge, Parliament itself in terms of oversight not doing its job. So at the end of the day, you look at a budget that is at deficit, but even the little that we collect is being misused and no one really cares. So as Kenyans now participate and pour into their views in this budget making process, how do they ensure that this is actually dealt with? Because the bodies that are meant to do it, it's politics being played.
See, most of our budget speeches or budget statements or policy statements that come from Treasury are cut and paste. They're the same ones that are there for the last 20, 30 years. I mean, if you read any budget, go and look for the 2 or 3 budget occupied.
Same thing.
Use the same word.
Thing.
Rationalization of public expenditure. We're going to do this, we're going to do that. Those lofty words are always there in the budget. But there's one office that, everything is about leadership, let me tell you. And I keep saying, whenever I talk about this thing, this is all about governance. So what about good governance? So it's all about the leadership. If the president, because everyone here is appointed by a president.
Yes.
That's why the Treasury CS cannot fire the accounting officer of agriculture if he brings in that fertilizer which has sand inside or whatever.
Yes.
He can't, because this guy is also appointed by the same person who appointed him. But if the president gives a commitment that in my administration I will not allow A, B, C, D, and he lives to that, these things will stop.
Yes.
Absolutely.
But where there is no penalty, then it will not stop. It will be the same. And that's the challenge we have in this country. It's all really about the leadership. It's all about governance.
I want to tie this a little bit into what we heard the president say yesterday. I actually tweeted about this as well. He said that for the first time, Kenya has reserves of $10 billion, $10 billion US dollars, and congratulated Treasury for actually being able to achieve this milestone, and said, the thing you're saying now, we've been crunching the numbers, we've been tightening the screws here and there, and that's how we've been able to put this money aside. A reserve of $10 billion is crazy, isn't it, Bilo? Is it possible to have reserves of this amount of money whereby, number one, there's such high debt, number two, there's so many things that are undone that for which this budget that we're looking at now is actually supposed to have taken care of in years gone by? Would this be an artificial situation, or how would that work with all these conversations that we're currently having? You laugh.
2-3 years ago, when this administration came in, the issues we were discussing those days was the Forex. The exchange rate was crazy. It had gone to almost 168, because remember, and then there was a shortage. We couldn't find dollars. Businesses were complaining. Some of those macroeconomic issues that we were complaining about at the time, today they don't feature so much because they have been dealt with. I think, to give them credit, they did deal with some of those things. They did stabilize the currency down. All those things like the oil, fuel prices, and there were things that were significant at the time, and they've been dealt with. We give them credit. But you see, the Forex reserves is an essential thing for the purpose of what you're saying basically is, in any country, you need to have a certain amount of foreign currency to enable your businessmen to be able to import what they want to import. So we call it import cover. You need to have, like in this country, we always used to say we must have at least 3 months or 4 months import cover. So, and where you don't have those reserves, then you get into a situation where there's a crisis of the currency, and then there's a shortage in supply of currency, and then the rate goes up. And you remember what happened in 2021, 22 when that crisis. So I think what then they have done was using the monetary policy, the central bank. They were able to stabilize the Forex. What they do is they play around with on the interest rates, on through the monetary policy, so that the more if it becomes very expensive for you to borrow, then you will not borrow. If it becomes less expensive, so that what you are going to do is you reduce the amount of shilling in the market by making it very expensive for people to borrow. So they've been raising the interest rates and so forth. So it makes it more, that way, indirectly, then what you're doing is you're making the dollars to be more available. That's basically what they did using that monetary policy. But at the same time, the impact of it is now the interest rates becomes more high.
Yeah.
And so these are the same measures that are used for fighting inflation by governments.
Yeah.
So yes, they have very good Forex reserves, and that's why the shilling has stabilized, even with all the crisis of Trump and so forth. But you know, that does not necessarily. It's good for businesses, because now we don't have that crisis of the dollar, we don't have the exchange going crazy. You know, that's good for the businesses, and ultimately also for the people who will benefit, all of us in the country. But you see, for the ordinary Kenyan, is they don't see the benefit of all those things. If you announce, it's the businessmen who would understand. Yes, that's very helpful, and we are, at least then in the short term, the long term, we can say our currency is going to remain. I can plan.
Yes,
you know, using the today's rate of 130. That look, next year I can say maybe by December even 130. I can use that rate. So it's good for businesses. But for ordinary person, I think they are looking at
bread and butter issues.
Yes, and those the cost for you to get that, you have raised cost of finance for businesses, and so you have made things expensive. Don't forget.
That's how it has come about. Look, it's important for us to have these conversations, learning one or two things every day, and I think that's what you've been able to do for us today. Bill Okero, economic analyst, has been here with us this morning. Thank you so much for joining us today. More about this, of course, in the near future. It continues. We still have to talk about it. It's important that we do.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.
We'll be talking with the Secretary General of the KMPDU, that's Dr. Davji Atela, and he'll be with us shortly. We'll look into those conversations with him. And even as we do, Dennis and Ndu with you this morning. The square root of Dennis is?
Dennis squared.
Okay, thanks. So a number of things happen, and when we talk about them, we actually put them out. They're things that shouldn't and cannot be hidden, and we know that whether you want to look at it religiously or otherwise, people do perish for lack of knowledge. So we share the information, we have the conversations, we put them front and center as they should. All right, there are staff wrangles, and they're stalling the SHA recruitment process. One would imagine that one Dr. Luga has his knickers in a twist over this. Wrangles continue to disrupt the transition and recruitment process of the newly established Social Health Authority, with reports indicating growing discontent among some staff. Now, the Public Service Commission is reported to have issued letters to some staff members who did not apply to transition to SHA or who opted for redeployment to other public service institutions. This development comes even as senators demanded that the SHA should absorb all the defunct National Health Hospital and Insurance Fund employees. Senators are also calling for a thorough vetting of staff to weed out unscrupulous employees who approved numerous fictitious claims, causing the loss of millions of taxpayer shillings. Senate Majority Leader Aaron Chariot tell the House that 95 to 99% of former NHIF staff were hardworking Kenyans who deserve the country well and deserve another chance. So the thought was that, well, you have a new authority, NHIF is defunct, but they said these are the people who were holding the system together. So if you're moving into a new authority, why are you not able to then just transition people from point A to point B? But there seems to be some politics at play here. A recent court ruling ordered all positions to be re-advertised publicly, effectively blocking the exclusive hiring of former NHIF employees. So essentially they had to reapply if they were going to transition. 2 weeks ago, the PSC extended temporary contracts for former NHIF employees deployed to SHA. Several positions have already been advertised internally, with recruitment restricted to former NHIF staff. 1,730 is the number of employees who were temporarily deployed to SHA in October 2024 for 6 months. Does it make sense to just take the same people who are working in the system and move them over? Or would you need to get fresh blood, as it were, to start in a new authority? Because we're changing everything. That's the question at hand. Why would that be a problem?
Look at it from the perspective that why were we really moving from NHIF to SHA? Simply because there are reports that NHIF was not working as expected, right? The reason why we came up with a new system called SHA, which would need then more training and whatnot. So perhaps we needed new blood to go in with the new thing, one would argue.
You know, the other question is, why did SHA move, or rather deviate from the original approved hiring by the PSC? Some of these institutions, what happens is there's just power play from the top. And whenever there's power play, there's someone who is benefiting because you keep making these changes, shifts. Obviously, I mean, we're not foreigners in our own country. We know. Kuna kitu mahali. Kuna kakitu mahali.
Kuna kitu mahali.
That is always what will happen. But, you know, just the approval without the green light is an issue in itself. Is an issue in itself. But you look at, you know, it's so difficult to follow through the whole drama around SHA.
Sure.
You know, at one point you're discussing payments, you're discussing the systems working, then you're discussing, okay, who is involved in the recruitment process, who are the people being hired. It's just crazy. It's crazy.
One would imagine that as the SHA was being put in place, the entire ecosystem and structure around SHA would have been put in place, including those that are considered critical in running SHA. So even if we needed people to be absorbed from NHIF, there ought to have been a process, a regulation, a guideline on how they would be absorbed inside SHA to make it easy and smooth. That we're talking about these after the fact, there is a problem.
You know, this is interesting. So, a total of 1,730 were temporarily deployed.
Yes.
The understanding was, you know how you go to look for a job, or you are called for a job, there is a contract that is involved. So you're given terms. So in this case, you're told, okay, your contract would only last 6 months. So that's the understanding. So initially, these same people were to undergo that suitability test and whatnot, with those now who qualify transitioning to permanent roles within the authority. Now, those who do not qualify, first of all, that first layer, there are those who qualify and there are those who will not qualify. The politics around who qualifies. Of course, some of these things in Akonga ni kujuana. Then those who do not qualify for permanent positions at SHA are to be sent to the Public Service Commission for redeployment.
To where?
So this is the issue of, fine, hautapata hiyo kazi, but we're sending you to this place for redeployment. Okay, so the redeployment, then some employees are expected to be offered early retirement and all this. And so what is happening actually currently in government with all these things going on? So a lot of departments, there's this freeze on getting new people on board, of course. So what is happening? You still need to promote people within you know, the different government departments, within different line ministries. So you need to promote, but then there are people who need to go for retirement. Okay? Now they can't go for retirement and you can't bring these people up for promotion, so they are stuck there. So if you hire, you are stacking up numbers. Then the confusion is when it comes to promoting, who then do you promote? Because this one has now better papers. After staying in the same position for 10 years. They need to move up, but they can't move up. And those who are moving up, ni kujuana. It's who you know.
But would we see a difference? The number of people. Do we see a difference in the work, essentially, that is being asked in the authority and what was happening at the fund? It's more or less the same work. You're not asking for new skill sets to then be employed when you bring in these new individuals. The thing is that it would appear as though there was a taint or a stain on the image of folks who worked under NHIF. And what you're trying to do by moving them away or asking for a new recruitment is to sanitize the employee image, because now you're moving into something new. But then it doesn't make a difference if you're still saying some of these people we will still move, because where's a better pool to then harvest from than the people who did the work in the old system for the last 50 years. Where's a better place to get experience from? So, do we see the hand of some kind of political gimmicks being played here, whereby you're going to say, well, we're going to hold up on all of this and we're going to start looking for people from afresh? Remember that this is a system where you're moving the country sick, you're moving the country in terms of people who are looking for health services every day, every minute. There's somebody who's going into hospital. Do you have the time to play about and say, well, we're not going to use you? And that's what's causing these wrangles now. That will then ask yourself the question, so who's going to handle this while we decide what is happening? Why can't we get our ducks in a row and say, you know what, you have a pool of experience here, just make sure you're moving the right people to get this thing done. Because you're still keeping them in one pool or another. And it's just, why can't we just get it done and get it right every time?
And one of the things that the employees were talking about is the biggest concern around salaries and job grades at NHIF. They were different, at the time, including the salary scales. So when you talk about these transitions, what I know about these transitions, and when you're trying to create new space and getting rid of what you will refer to as the old, is you create then an enabling environment to scatter, to bring in, to do whatever it is that you want. It's for me, always it's like a Game of Thrones,
or something.
Yeah.
Well, perhaps Dr. Davji Atela will then be able to, share some insight into all of this, because it's not just about taking a stethoscope to someone's chest, but it's looking at the ecosystem within which health operates. And that's the conversation that we have this morning. Dr. Atela, good morning. Karibu sana.
Good morning. How are you?
I am fine. We were expecting you at 9 o'clock.
The traffic.
Oh, there's traffic.
Yes.
It was interesting because I did a little video for folks. It goes on digital, and they asked, what is one of the reasons that Kenyans always give for being late? And I said, well, that's got to be the thing. It's the traffic.
If you look at our roads compared to roads somewhere else, they have 6 lanes.
There's the stab for infrastructure to be done better in the country. You've heard it from Dr. Atela. He's saying, you know what, fix the roads so that we can be early. Anyway, good to have you here, and it's good to see you. Let's welcome you probably before we get into the conversation. There's a lot to talk about. Dennis is going to share today's proverb, but he'll tell you where it's from, and then we can get you to open up a little bit about your interpretation. Right?
Yeah. Okay. So, Dr. good thing is when you talk about roads, we've been told that NYS will soon be getting into that. So we hope they'll fix it, right?
Yes.
But now let's go down South Africa. You've been to Eswatini before? Swaziland?
No, I've been to
South Africa.
Yes.
Oh, so Eswatini is just
in South Africa.
In South Africa, so you've been there, yeah?
Yes.
But now, what's one of the greatest things that stand out for you when you hear about Eswatini?
The kingship and the annual marriage.
And the annual marriage ceremony, right?
Yes.
So today, our proverb comes from there, right? And it goes like this. A man shows his character by what he laughs at. A man shows his character by what he laughs at. What do you make of that?
That a man shows his character by what he laughs at.
Yes.
It means that what he laughs at is what actually brighten the heart or the soul. So it means it does what impacts him. Yeah, so it demonstrates what if you are a pessimist person, then the things that are devastating to people is what will make you happy, like we've seen with dictators. But if you are like a priestly person who wants to save the people, if you are a trade unionist, then the justice and success of people is what will make you happy. So then that's what it means.
Indeed. If we jump right into it, and I think that just forms a good basis. Thanks for that interpretation. We're looking into UHC, who's really holding Kenya's healthcare system in their hands. US Secretary General of the KMPDU. I mean, we've had a number of conversations about what's really ailing the health sector. For the last 6, now going to 7 weeks, UHC employees have down their tools, and because of that, many people have then been denied access to healthcare at medical facilities across the country because of this. And so if the employees who have been brought on board essentially to act activate universal health coverage are not at work, we start to ask the questions about if this is really working. And if people then go to hospital and the testimony, I mean, you've been in the middle of it, Dr. Terry. In the middle of it, we hear that, you know, some people cannot get treated, some get treated, some it's paid for. Can we say that the system as a whole is working if we have employees on strike, not being paid, doctors still having an issue here and there, medical clinical officers on strike, nurses about to join the thing? I mean, we're still there. We really haven't moved the needle in terms of the development of this. Why are we still here, Doc?
You know, if you look at the issues, I would say in blanketly, it revolves around funding. It's all about money. That is money following up all this ideology, all our plan for universal healthcare. But if you come down to the UHC staff that are currently on strike, we need to go down and check under what circumstances did the national government decide to capacity build county governments by employing the 8,500 UHC? Because it is very clear to us that we cannot talk about universal health care without a full focus on human resource. And not just a human resource, but a human resource that is motivated and is employed in the right time, right terms. Because these staff, 8,500 as has been said, they have contracts, they were interviewed with different counties. But then we have the payroll systems coming up with the national government. We saw today, around 14th of last month, that the ministry wrote to the COG, can we verify the existence of this stuff? The numbers that were not tallying, it means that there has been some ineffective engagement between the Council of Governors and the ministry. And this whole problem is not new. It's a problem that started well back in 2019. It's a 6-year problem that we are having today, that has been that the government actually violated the labor laws, because under our labor law 2007 and the ILO Convention 100, there is no way two employees doing the same job can be paid different wages. You have to be paid the same wages and you be employed the same terms. That's what the law provides. So ideally, I look at a situation whereby we need to resolve that problem that occurred in 2019 now.
Which two employees would be working the same job but being paid two different salaries?
We have the UHC nurses and the UHC staff. We have those who are employed under permanent and pensionable terms. For example, you'll find that the UHC nurses are earning, for example, 50,000, while those nurses that were employed on the PNP are earning 100,000, but they are working in the same station. There's a misnomer that occurred in 2019 that ought to be corrected right now. And therefore, it has transcended, I will say, 4 ministers, because we had Kagwe at that particular time, then you had Nakumicha, then you've had Deborah over the same issue. I see the new CS over the same matter now, but I found him to be more progressive over this issue than the previous ministers, because none of them has come up and said this is a problem that needs to be sorted out, that we have to rectify the contracts, we have to put them under the right terminologies, just like other workers in the counties. And therefore, but then there's a pushback. We see counties say, no, we will not accept these employees unless these terms are reviewed. Yet these are people who are working in those particular counties. Because without the UHC staff, without the healthcare workers, we cannot have services in the hospitals. So we need to have a robust conversations, a robust agreement that is satisfactory to the UHC staff, satisfactory to the Ministry of Health that is paying them, and satisfactory to the counties, ideally, rather than the, I would say, the conundrum of reactions from both parties. Because when the ministers say we want to change them to these terms, the country say no, we can't receive them. Then also they say we can't allow, because whatever which was said on 14th was a glaring issue that it has to be investigated. If you say that ministry is paying 8,700, county say no, we have 5,700, then there's a problem. Where is the money for the other 3,000 going? And if that money is well utilized, then how we will not even be talking about the contract so far. We will have that money can actually sort out the 5,500. So those are the questions I think need to be taken into place. But ideally, fundamentally, there is no worker who need to be discriminated, who need to be paid less than the others, who need to be put on inferior terms, and therefore the UHC staff deserve this dignity.
What systemic failures do these strikes and all these issues that you're talking about reveal about, county level healthcare management in its entirety?
We have had an issue of governance that has affected, healthcare is not just the infrastructure. We need to have a functional infrastructure, the hospitals and the equipment that actually can run these particular facilities. We need to have the issue of the drugs and the products also supplied. We need to have the human resource that actually now make sure that things are operationalized. But also there's aspect of governance, where governance in healthcare becomes a bit tricky because we have ministry where we must have a very decisive, resolute cabinet secretary. Then we have 47 county governments that also operate in or rather semi-autonomous capacity, whereby they want to be very autonomous with their responses. So you realize that the agreements are done and are signed and policies are made, but out of 47 counties, maybe only 30 takes into effect these particular issues. Maybe 17 don't want to look into them. So those brings the reactions. Sometimes agreements that they agree, ministry and counties, they don't honor both sides. So that becomes a problem. And that's why we need somebody who, and I was telling this to some of our colleagues, that we may have a very good minister, like now we do, who can make decisions on things.
Okay.
But then every decision that is made has to be agreed by 47 county governors. So if only 5 agrees, then it means the 43 will not agree to the problem. Even us as a union, we had a national strike where we have a return to work agreement that was signed by Council of Governors together with the Ministry of Health. I can tell you that the things that we signed with the Ministry of Health have been implemented, but now we have strikes in different counties. We have almost 6 strikes. And we've been having strikes every month.
Over the same
issues. Even now we still have a strike in Kiambu County. We had a strike last week in Kakamega. We're planning a strike over in Lamu, in Nakuru, in Laikipia. Over the same things. Why? Because these people are not prioritizing these matters as it should be. And that is...
You've said the issue of, the CS, you have 47 counties,
yes,
or governors. Is it a policy disagreement? Is it a question of control? Is it a question of funding? What exactly is it? Why do you have few counties saying, okay, we are going this line? Then you have other counties, majority, who will disagree. Why this push and pull?
It is a subjective response to issues that has been taking place. For example, let me give you a practical example of statutory deductions. We have Social Aid Authority that is being deducted from every employee, including in the counties. Then we realize that this money is not remitted to Social Aid Authority. By 9th of every month, then if you are a civil servant from the counties and the money has not been remitted, you can't access care. So when we ask this to counties that have not remitted, they will tell you we've not received exchequer from the treasury. And therefore they'll cling onto that problem that you've not received the money. When it is convenient for them, they will say, no, these matters are devolved. You must discuss everything to deal with health workers with us. When you come to discuss with them, they say, no, we have not received the money for us to implement those agreements. So it is convenient when counties are saying health is fully devolved, when it's related to the issues of healthcare. It's also time for them to conveniently say, no, this is not devolved when it's money part.
Dr. I hear you speak of a situation that from both levels of government, there seems to everyone is pulling on their side.
Yes.
When you hear the counties say, fine, it is devolved here, but when it comes to matters payment we've not received from the exchequer, here we have a cabinet secretary who's saying is top of things and is making decisions.
Yeah.
But both levels of government do not seem to be speaking the same level. How is that then coming to affect your service delivery and ensuring that all the agreements that you have are able to be implemented?
So as a union, we tend to, and this is what happens to all other unions. In reality, we understand and acknowledge the fact that when we talk about healthcare in Kenya, we put accountability with the ministry. We put accountability with the president. We put accountability with the treasury over those matters. We try to have one approach to the issue. But when it comes down to the agreed positions and the implementations, we try to task individual employers that are responsible. Because it will be quite unfair to, for example, take a strike actions to Nairobi County when they have implemented the agreements that were signed and prioritized it, while, for example, Kiambu or Kakamega has not, or Nakuru has not. So that's why you will see sporadic strikes after a national strike in different places that have not prioritized the issues of workers. And I can tell you, each and every county have different priorities. You will issue a notice of action to Tharaka Nithi County. And Tharaka Nithi County governor will sit down and resolve the issues before even expiry of 10 days of the notice. You will issue the same in another county, Kakamega, 21 days, and it will go without any meeting, and strike will commence within 40 days. So that shows you that every governor has a different priority regarding how to handle the human resource. And that reflects on the health service delivery in each and every county based on that, on the way they treat the healthcare workers.
What would standardize this? Because let's take the Teacher Service Commission, for example. That with the Teacher Service Commission, it really doesn't matter what county you're in or wherever it is, that it is standardized across board, that this is how we operate, this is what we know is going to happen. What would it take to say that whether you're in Tarakaniti or you're in Turkana or you're in Mombasa, that we know that this is how the hiring will take place, this is what people will be paid, this is how it will happen? What would it take? Because we've had these brick and mortar issues forever.
You know, we've been having these conversations, and I mean, I believe even in the Kenya Kwanza manifesto, it was well indicated that there's a problem between the health workers and the counties regarding the issues of career progressions, regarding the issues of promotions, regarding the issues of overwork and employment. These were things that are put, and then in the manifesto they put that there will be health service commissions to mediate. The national government will mediate to establishment of health service commission to handle this problem. So we all know, the government knows, the counties knows, but this problem is only realized when a new governor comes to office. When a new governor comes to office, he wants to hold on to the issue of the health workforce because of the budget that comes with it. Some of them even end up having ghost workers within that process. But all the governors who have served their second term, they respond very differently on this matter. You realize that it's very hard to have a strike in a county where the governor is serving the second term. But it is almost more easy and certain to have a strike in a county where we have a first-term governor, because most of them are burying their heads in the sand. They are looking not into how to provide the services, but how to do the PRs. So I know there's need for that health service commission, but without that, I think the issue of KHRAC, this Kenya Health Human Advisory Council, if it is empowered, then most of these things can be standardized. And there should be an enforcement framework that if a policy is made in the Ministry of Health, then it can actually be enforced by the counties, because counties sometimes refuse. And when they refuse, there's no any enforcement mechanism that exists that ministries can actually make them to do it. Yeah, we have seen that before. With the decisions that are made by independent bodies like Public Service Commission, that then counties cannot implement. And then that brings the gap that we see. For even in the issues of just the drug payments, like KEMSA, you realize that many counties will be holding the KEMSA money up to 7-10 billion across the nation. So it's definitely that a doctor who is in the hospital will not be able to offer the services, because you can't offer the services without the drugs. You can't offer the services without the equipment. And unless the county prioritizes to pay, unless a mechanism is brought that ensures that these payments are done to KEMSA, the doctor will just be doing nothing. Unless a system has been brought that ensures that these statutory deductions, these loans, these SHA are all paid on time, the workers will still wallow in desperation.
So, but how do you respond to because the CS at some point during COVID talked about dealing with cartels.
Yes.
It almost seemed like he cannot control decisions. He can't control what is going on within the ministry because of these cartels. And we know the cartels, of course, connected to the politicians. In your opinion, because we will have this back and forth like Undu is saying, how or what strategies can be employed to depoliticize healthcare in this country? Because the issue of national government or the ministry and counties is a never-ending story. Since devolution, we've never managed to deal with this. What, in your opinion, do you think would be the right strategy to depoliticize healthcare generally?
You see, there has to be mechanisms to make the politicians, in particular, to see the interest of a working public healthcare system. And one thing I keep on saying is that we cannot talk about healthcare service delivery or universal healthcare without investing in that healthcare. We must prioritize a budget for healthcare, both from national government and in the county government. And the moment we don't do that, you will see the political leaders not consuming that healthcare that themselves are leading. You will see governors, you will see the MPs, you will see the ministers having very hefty medical insurances that then guarantee them access to healthcare outside the country. And therefore, whether this healthcare is dysfunctional, it will not be an issue that affects them. So yes, a policy that ensures all of us have this access to the public healthcare that we provide will, in a way, ensure that that it works. Number two, the issue of cartels or corruption is rampant. In fact, at one point, we were seeing that devolving healthcare is, in a way, was devolving in corruption. Because we have those who are just in charge of procurement and are looking at how much are they getting from kickbacks within the counties, and the same thing within the ministries. I remember when the minister came into office and he was being asked whether there are cartels, whether Afia House is a mafia house, and he said no, it's a Hafia House. But 1-2 months down the line, he's saying no, he has seen so much cartels in the ministry that it's a mafia house. Even this issue of UHC that is being talked about now, where the ministry talks about 8,700, while the counties talk about 5,700, meaning there's 3,000 difference. You know how much that totals to? It's millions of shillings.
Yes.
So ideally, when such things are raised, there should be investigations. There's things need to be put in a proper way so that this money can be put in the right use for the public.
But whose responsibility is it to kick that into place?
The responsibility must be for all of us. I mean, if you can't put aspersions on one side. The ministry must be responsible for any corruption that takes place there. The leaders and the unions and the workers must also be responsible for this. And therefore, if it happens within the working facilities, they must raise the alarm over this matter. And these people must be brought to book. You know, most of the time, I find the issues of corruptions and the issues of pilferage of funds to be just a propaganda thing. Like you just talk about it, the media raise it up the way the former ministers used to do, and nothing is done. For example, in the NHIF that they are bringing about, the government has all mechanisms that if there are people who are involved in financial pilferage or in corruptions or in these deals, they can be brought to book up to the right point of it.
Dr. What will it take for this push and pull, for this endless fight between national government, county government, and the health in the healthcare sector to finally come to an end, and for healthcare to finally be given the priority it deserves? Because the patients out there are tired of the back and forth over and over again. What will it take for people to sit on the table and say, this is the way we want to go and we must do it?
You know, we must be, as Kenyans, ready to hold our government leaders accountable, the politicians that are elected in office. Because, you see, the Constitution outlines it very clearly in Article 43, that healthcare is a right of all Kenyans, and that the emergency care, you need to be able to get it anywhere else, anywhere we go to it. So if, for example, government tells us that we are going to get these services within a county government facility, you go there and don't get the care, you need to ask, why is that the situation? You need not to leave these things for only the healthcare workers, the unions. The public must have awareness and must be able to put the leaders who are elected in the office to account from the MCAs. Because when you go to a facility and you don't get the drugs, or you don't get an healthcare worker, or you don't get the equipment that you need, then you should ask the MCA from your region, what is his role in the county assembly? We need to ask the members of parliament that what is their role in the budget that they're doing. We need to ask the government, then what is the UHC that you're going to give us when we have to sell our lands and properties to access care?
In your opinion, is there political goodwill in ensuring that these issues are sorted out once and for all?
A political goodwill is forced, and it's not always given, because most of the times, if you stay put and ask and wait for it, it will never happen, because at any time that healthcare is not functional, somebody is benefiting. When public healthcare doesn't work, it means that those who have invested in private sector are benefiting and are reaping more. And therefore, when we come out and speak about these things, then changes come. I believe to now that the changes that took place in the Ministry of Health were not a mere thing that happened because there was no reactions from Kenyans. We saw all Kenyans coming out and say social health authority is not working. We saw Kenyans coming out and saying that the issue of the UHC is a pipe dream and it's rhetoric. We need a change. And then the ministers that were there, the leaders that were there, were always saying things are okay. Well, they were saying that you will go to oncology clinic and top up money to get care. You will go to the ICU and top up. But I'm saying this leadership who are there now are coming for a change because of one reason. When the cabinet secretary, Duale, came into office, we had a concern and we had done a press regarding the ICU package where it was 4,000. It was increased to 28,000. We had talked about the chronic oncology cases where it was 300,000. 300,000 means that you'll get, let's say you are on Zoladex as a drug.
Yeah.
You'll get 3 months. then use for your partner another 3 months. So it means you will have 6 months without the drug. We were concerned about that, and it was raised to 550,000 for each for every cycle.
Okay.
And then another, your partner also 550. Then they went as far as having an agreement now with Roche, where instead of this drug going for 120,000, it's now at 40,000. So it means that if you have your package, you can go the full circle without having to add more funds.
More money.
Yes, and I think that's why the noise about social authority has gone down, because of those interventions. We have seen the board went ahead to hire a new CEO to that office. I believe social authority is working, but there's still more changes that need to be done, particularly those that goes with the co-payment of services, whereby some hospitals will desire then to charge you fund beyond what has been prescribed in the benefit package. But also this change that we have seen recently, a benefit package team has been put in place in charge with Professor Jahoko. This tells you that yes, the noise, the concerns of the Kenyans did not go into deaf ears. There's something that's being done. There's something that actually can make us have that access we need. But then that's be progressive. We must keep on engaging. We must keep on bringing these matters, because that is the only way that these people will see. Because most of them don't consume the same services that they're offering.
Let's talk about ethical concerns.
Yes.
I know you've been on record and you raised an alarm over the recruitment of over 1,500, something like that, of foreign medical practitioners in the country. And I think in one of your statements you said these people are basically coming and there's potential human organ trafficking. I don't know whether there was any evidence to that statement. And in part two of that question is, what then should be actioned as a regulation to address these concerns of bringing in then foreigners who are coming to practice?
Our statement on the issue of foreigner was backed up by data. We did actual research to try to investigate the number of foreign doctors that have been registered by the Kenya Medical Practitioners and Dentist Councils within a period of 6 years, and realized there was a big number that has been registered, over 1,500. And then we looked at what are the numbers of doctors who have also trained over the same period that then are not employed. Then we saw that there was a big number at the same point. And then we checked what necessitated the importation of a medical officer, who then we have those who have graduated from Kenya. Then the council told us that their role is just to register. As long as you've come and you meet all the documentations, they'll just issue a license. And most of the license issuance was initiated by private hospitals that wanted cheap labor from these foreign doctors. So they will go to India, they'll go to the Indian-owned hospitals like Medihill, will actually go to India and get the doctors there, and then sometimes when they lobby and force the KMPDC to register license these doctors, then they are housed in those particular facilities. This was happening in many of the hospitals. So, and in the essence, there's one thing they're trying to bypass, the wage. So if you're brought up as such, because of the way things are in India, they try to enforce that here. They will pay them lower wages. Sometimes they will go ahead as confiscating their license, their visas, their passports, so that they are actually more of a slaves within these facilities. And those are the ones who are being used to do all these manner of procedures, because then you don't have any, you act like this is your life, there's nothing else you can do. That's one thing. The other thing is that the doctors were being brought in so that they can bypass the CBA rates of paying wages, so that they are also in a lower terms and they have cheap labor. And therefore, we supported the statement of the minister that it is not justifiable that you ignore the doctors that exist in the country and to bring those from outside the country when we have those who can do these jobs, unless it's a speciality that we don't have as a country, that we can't provide. It does not make any sense to bring doctors from outside.
Is it an ethical question? Because if let's say I want to hire Dennis as a doctor, and I'm going to pay him, let's say, 200,000 a month, and I bring you from Tanzania, and your salary will be 50,000. If I go for you, you're doing the same thing, level of education, everything is the same. What really is the issue there?
It is both unethical, it's both injustice, it's also contravenes all the existing conventions that protects workers. If you look at ILO Convention 97, it says that if you are a skilled worker or a worker from anywhere in the world and you move to a different country, you should not be treated in any way less than those parts in those countries. That is Convention 97. What Convention 100 says, if you are working in a same environment, doing the same job, you cannot be paid unequal wages. You have to be paid equally because you are producing the same services and the same job. So and Kenyan Labor Act 2007 says the same. So by the time that somebody is going to import a worker from outside the country and pay them wages, is a criminal and is violating all the existing laws. So, and therefore, and that's why we're talking about the UHC. By the time government is paying them less wages, it's violating its own law. So it's unethical. Yes.
Why do we operate? I mean, just looking at all of these things, why do we operate in a system of everlasting CBAs? That CBAs came into existence to say, okay, there was the group versus the government were not able to agree, right? And whether there was, you said at the beginning of this that all of this boils down to money and what's available and what people are willing to part with in order to make things happen. So we exist within a CBA between doctors and the government, exist in a CBA between clinical officials and the government, a CBA between nurses and the government, CBA everywhere we look, there's a CBA. But then still with these CBAs, there are certain tenets of those CBAs which are not honored, they're not kept. From the last CBA going into the next CBA, and then we seem to agree to enter into CBAs because it looks like a quick stopgap measure for the problem that we're currently facing, which is a strike. So there's a strike because we're not able to do 1, 2, 3. Let's have a CBA. Why do we keep accepting CBAs as modus operandi when it comes to these issues?
For record, government really fears signing CBA with healthcare workers.
Do they?
Yeah, and in the history of this country, the CBAs that have been signed with the civil servant unions, they've been signed with teachers, and they are never implemented. And it took KMPDU 100 days to actually get a CBA signed. The only CBA that has been signed in the health sector with the national government and all the 47 counties of the CBA between KMPDU and the government. That CBA, yes, was signed, but CBA remains useless and it does not make any sense to every worker if it is not implemented. And therefore, as a union, we made a very clear decision that we cannot engage into a new CBA negotiation or discussions without this CBA that we had being implemented. And that's why that was from the basis of the strike of 2024. And also there was a caveat whereby the existing CBA was being violated by the reduction of the wages of the intern doctors. Those are the things that took us to the streets. But as we speak today, there was an agreement that the CBA is being implemented. That is, the interns are getting the right wages as per the CBA in the first lots of it. And when the new lot, there's proclamations on the same. The arrears that were owed to us for 7 years, in December and January, 50% was paid. And I think the new 50% has been put in the budgets for payment in July, August. So ideally, if that is paid as agreed, this will be the first CBA to be fully implemented in the history of this country.
Ever.
Because CBAs are always signed and agreed, but then you have to go on strike for another one where they can't implement and they ask you to negotiate a new one. That's something that we took note of and we did not agree to any negotiations.
So do they work then?
They work, but on a forced way. You know, if you don't force employers to implement CBAs as a unions, then you have no powers. You have no reason to exist. And therefore, that's why it boils down to strikes. And the moment workers strike, the moment we go on these strikes, that most of the time we say are strikes that are well brought about by the government. Why are we saying this? Because when you sign an agreement, and you sign a framework of implementing that agreement, and then you go put it in a closet and forget about it, you have meetings, you don't follow it up, you have court orders, you don't follow, then it forces the workers to then also down the tools because you've down your tool. And that's why we have those strikes. And these are the strikes for every other healthcare workers. They may not be having CBAs, but they have return to work agreement, they have engagement MOUs, they have things that you've agreed with employers. But employers are very quick to agree with workers. For example, in Kiambu County, where we've been having strike, and strike is still ongoing now, we had a strike work agreement signed last year on 8th of May 2024. We had another agreement signed in November. We had a conciliation agreed. So when we were going on strike, we had tried everything. So we had to just join the government on their strike. They ran to court. The court told them, this union has been here with us 5 times. I cannot suspend the doctor strike in Kiambu. The strike has to continue until there is a mutual agreement between the union and the employer.
Yeah.
Because for a long time, employers have been using the court to suspend strikes. They've been using the court not to run away from doing their job. But I think courts are smartening now and realizing, this is consistent disregard to the welfare of the workers. Yes.
Davji, we have the universal healthcare, which is a great thing for the Republic of Kenya and for the citizens. If it works, the government is happy, the citizens are happy, and the doctors are happy. But for some weird reason, it's just not working. So, Kenyan who's listening to you right now and hearing you speak, how does it look? How grave is it? How bad or how good is it?
I think we need to have a lot of investment in the universal healthcare to actually see a reality of it and enjoy the fruits of it. I'm glad to say that, and it's being reported now, that there's improvement in the service delivery by the Social Health Authority vis-a-vis what it was a few months ago. There is need to have improvement in the drug deliveries and products to these particular hospitals. There's an actual need for the Kenya Kwanza government to implement the manifesto by employing health workers as promised in the manifesto, because they know that it needs health workers are motivated to have these functional systems. There's need to weed out corruptions. I see the way ministry has started across board, from the ministries, from the counties, and then there's need to increase funding to this particular healthcare. With that, we can have hope that we'll get the universal healthcare, because the essence of universal healthcare is that if I am sick and I go to an hospital, I don't need to go back and sell my land and get this care. I don't need to worry about the community to contribute for me to get the care. And that's why we believe that a time has come that we must also be part of this conversation. We must contribute to this conversation. And I said this last year, and I think I can still say this now, that the best way to castigate issues with Social Health Authority is to register, be part of it. Because then you will go to the hospital and see what service have I not gotten, or what package that we need to put in place. And then with that, you can actually challenge and improve the thing.
So this is what we're talking about, essentially, is that we can't say it is not working if we don't register for it and actually test this thing to see if it works. So we can be here, we can complain, and we can say, well, Dennis went to the hospital, so SHA is not working. Me, Ndu, is complaining because Dennis went and it's not working. But I have not had an engagement. I have not activated the what I want to call right to complain because I have not registered for the thing. Also looking at, because it's a pool system, and it's not just in Kenya, it's a pool system. The NHS works on a pool system as well. All of these health systems that we've seen work on a pool system, that we take your contributions and we put them in one basket. And because we know that not everybody will go to hospital at the same time, that because you've made your contribution at one time or another, you will go to hospital, but you will then be banking on the resources that other people have put in. So what makes sense is that the more people register and make your payments, the more then it is available for you to have this service when you go to hospital. So what are we advocating here for, Daktari? Give them benefit of the doubt. In the meantime, everybody just register. Should you register and you then will not still be able to access, then that is a different conversation that we're having. But we can't complain if we don't register. Is that what we're saying?
No, what you're saying to Kenyans is that for this, to Social Aid Authority, register. So that when you go to that hospital and you have a concern, you are able to say, fine, I went to this hospital, I needed to have a sedan section done. I needed to have this particular medication, but I was not given because of this and this issue. It becomes an easy way to solve the problem than when you perceive that things are not moving. For example, I have got complaints from people who say they've gone to the hospital, and when they went to the hospital, out of a bill of 600,000, the Social Authority was paying for them 400,000. And then we ask, okay, if it's 400,000, why is it not paying for you the 200,000? Then the hospital will say the cost of us getting all these services is more than what you're being provided for. Then now we bring the conversation to Social Authority, tell them, okay, can we have a cost analysis between the hospital, the service providers, so that the costs that are going to be put as a package, then the patients don't need to pay more for that particular service. So it's easier to solve the problem when we have people registering. And I think that you've said that is very critical. It is almost impossible to have a functional social health authority when we have only salaried workers paying up in this thing, because then it's going to be meager. It's going to have a less package. But if we have everybody on board, then we all have a voice to ask for accountability for our money that we've contributed in this thing, both the informal sectors and the formal sector, because we are saying we'll be contributing these billions. And then we are saying these packages are low. Why can't we get the right packages based on the monies that we are contributing? But if we leave it only for the salaried workers, then they become the burden for the same, and many will not be able to access the packages that they need. So registration is a key for us, and it gives us the mantra for asking for accountability for both the national government, the social aid authority, and even the counties where you're going to get the services. And therefore, you can also demand. Most people are now paying when they're getting the services. And you see, when you pay and get the services and not pay again, there's a problem.
Yeah.
And that's why someone asking, why is the social authority demanding that you pay 1 year? It's for 1 year so that if you are okay, then your neighbor, your sister, somebody else then can use that money to get the services. And ideally, that is the only way to improve what we are demanding as Kenyans.
You see, Doc, you talk about a system and part of communication that many Kenyans do not have, because the way you are putting it down in terms of this pool that everyone needs to come in, Kenyans do not understand this message, and goes into communication from the Ministry of Health and all the health stakeholders for Kenyans to just understand. Therefore, just how critical then is it for the ministry to ensure that Kenyans understand the universal health care or even payment of SHA from your point of view?
Yeah, Dennis, healthcare can never be free.
Yes.
In such that if government doesn't pay, then you as an individual has to pay. And that's why we have a record of the out-of-pocket expenditure of 150 billion. Therefore, if we say we have a social insurance pool, it means that the little that each one of us contributes is what is to take care of our healthcare when we need these services. Therefore, the more we are in contributing, the more accountable this money is what will guarantee that if I go to an hospital, I'll get the services that I need. What has given us a drawback is the politicization of this social aid authority. That they, for a long time, from 2023 to 2024, the government was in a cocoon whereby they were not listening to any advices or any stakeholder advice that were given was being shared. But this thing has since changed, because we went to court as a union in 2023 over this and actually stopped it. We went to Court of Appeal in 2024. We were against the change of this particular thing because of the packages that were there. But the time came when all the Kenyans realized there was a problem. The government then realized there's need to actually have these things understood and put into consideration. And I think that came with this new team here now. We're saying we need to actually have a conversations and make this thing work. Because you cannot say as a politician that it is working, then I go to the hospital, I don't get the care.
And I don't, exactly.
Because it's a practical thing. You go to the hospital and get care. It's not because the politician says it's working that you're going to get the care.
Yeah.
So with that ability, then now when they are open up for feedback, when open up for engagement, when they open up for change, then it is possible for all of us to be part of the process.
Indeed. Not a better way to end on this morning. And if anything, it's come out very clear that we all have to be part of this. Because when you're asking for accountability is on both sides. And to see this actually work. Dr. Davji Atela is the KMPDU Secretary General and has been here with us this morning, rounding out the conversation in the Situation Room this morning. Thanks so much, Doc. Always a pleasure. Let's keep talking as we must. Good morning.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.